The Frost Giant's Daughter by Robert E. Howard was the second Conan tale written and the only one to take place in the cold north. Written in a flurry right after the Phoenix on the Sword, the first Conan tale, inspired from the description of Conan's homeland, the cold north. Howard wrote this story telling of the young Conan's exploits with the Aesir, those whom Conan felt kinship with, more so than his own brooding people. The Frost Giant's Daughter is the shortest Conan story, yet it is also one of the strongest. It is truly a mythological story, and in fact the only one, a unique and fantastical story, departing in that it has encounters not with one god, but two, Ymir the god of the Aesir and the Vanir, as well as his daughter, Atali. In the Nordic creation myth, the primordial Ymir is essential as both a forefather and a key component of the world's formation. From his blood, the sea was created, from his flesh, the earth, from his bones, the mountains, and from his sweat, mankind. According to Howard, the stories of the Aesir and Vanir's battles and journeys serves as the basis for later Norse mythology, with both heroes and villains being elevated to the status of gods and monsters. As they would later be worshipped by the Scandinavian and German peoples, it is appropriate that Ymir and his daughter serve as their Aesir and Vanir's gods. Numerous mythological sources, most notably the poetic and prose Eddas, mention Ymir. Another thing that in my mind elevates this story is the beautiful descriptions and the prose. Take the beginning, for example. The clangor of the swords had died away. The shouting of the slaughter was hushed. Silence lay on the red-stained snow. The bleak pale sun that glittered so blindingly from the ice fields and the snow-covered plains struck sheens of silver from rent corselet and broken blade. Where the dead lay as they had fallen, the nerveless hand yet gripped the broken hilt, helmeted heads backdrawn in their death throes, tilted red beards and golden beards grimly upward, as if in last invocation to Ymir, the Frost Giant, god of a warrior race. Now if that doesn't immediately strike you and suck you in, I don't know what will. Fantastic opening. Some other author would have just started with a great battle had taken place, the fields were filled with bodies and swords and blood was everywhere, which would be a more typical way of writing this. But this is one of the things I love about Howard, is his descriptive writing, his atmospheric writing, his flowing words, but also words that seizes and grabs you. The Frost Giant's Daughter is a very mythological story, as I said before, and it stands alone in the Conan canon for being a very Nordic tale of encountering the gods. Reading through the story, you see clearly that Howard chose the many names of the characters we meet with names that symbolize something, from the mythological aspect or a historical one. Take for example the beginning battle between Conan and Heimdall. Clearly Heimdall is a take on Heimdall, the god and son of Odin, the Allfather. Heimdall in the Nordic mythology is the guardian of the Bifrost and watcher of the onset of Ragnarok, the Nordic Armageddon, the end of the world, the twilight of the gods. It is very interesting that Howard chose this name for the last Vanir warrior to be felled by Conan. But before he is felled by Conan, he strikes Conan's helmet and dents him quite badly. Otherwise seemingly an innocuous thing if not for the name of the warrior and what it symbolizes, and what Howard wrote next. A silvery laugh cut through his dizziness, and his sight cleared slowly. He looked up. There was a strangeness about all the landscape that he could not place or define, an unfamiliar tinge to earth and sky. But he did not think long of this. Before him, swaying like a sapling in the wind, stood a woman. And this is where we meet the first god or goddess, Atali, the Frost Giant's daughter. Now see that it seems, in my opinion, that Howard wrote with the intention that as Conan slew Heimdall, the so-called guardian of the realm of the gods, Conan was transported into the spiritual, not so much the physical, to the unseen realm. He could now see into the realm of the gods, and thus he immediately encounters the goddess Atali. Atali's etymology is difficult, one with many possibilities. One interesting possibility is she was directly inspired by the Greek goddess Atalanta. Another interesting possibility is Atli, the Terrible, one of Thor's many names, the name of a character in the Volsunga saga linked to Attila and a Norwegian jarl. The name Atli can be found in H. Rider Haggard's Eric Bright Eyes as well. In the essay Hyborian Genesis, Patrice Louinet makes the case that the Frost Giant's daughter may have been inspired by Thomas Bulfinch, who is best known for his book Bulfinch Mythology. The names Asgard, Bragi, Frost Giants, Heimdall, Horsa, Vanaheim and Ymir can be found in the outline of mythology. It's a very compelling theory. The innocent cause of so much sorrow was a maiden whose face you might truly say was boyish for a girl, yet too girlish for a boy. Her fortune had been told, and it was to this effect: Atalanta, do not marry, marriage will be your ruin. Terrified by this oracle, she fled the society of men and devoted herself to the sports of the chase. To all suitors, for she had many, she imposed a condition which was generally effectual in relieving her of their persecutions. I will be the prize of him who shall conquer me in the race, but death must be the penalty of all who try and fail. In spite of this hard condition, some would try. Bulfinch, page 141-142. Louinet also suggests the myth of Apollo and Daphne as an inspiration, only reversing the roles of pursuer and pursued, and deity and mortal. The love-struck god Apollo chased the mortal Daphne, whereas the lust-addled, or I would say spellbound mortal Conan chases the goddess Atali. Apollo loved her and longed to obtain her. He followed her, she fled, swifter than the wind, and delayed not a moment at his entreaties. The nymph continued her flight, and left his plea half-uttered. And even as she fled she charmed him. The wind blew her garments, and her unbound hair streamed loose behind her. The god grew impatient to find his wooings thrown away, and sped by Cupid, gain upon her in the race. It was like a hound pursuing a hare, with open jaws ready to seize, while the feebler animal darts forward, slipping from the very grasp. So flew the god and the virgin, he on the wings of love, and she on those of fear. The pursuer is the more rapid, however, and gains upon her, and his panting breath blows upon her hair. Her strength begins to fail, and ready to sink, she calls upon her father, the river god. Help me, Peneus, open the earth to enclose me, or change my form which has brought me into this danger. Bulfinch, page 20-22. Atali is a cruel goddess and mocks Conan, whereupon Conan says, "By the dark gods of my own race," he cried in anger, "though I am not of the golden-haired Aesir, none has been more forward in sword-play. This day I have seen 80 men fall, and I alone have survived the field where Wulfhere's reavers met the wolves of Bragi." Here once again we meet mythological and historical links in the story. Wulfhere, Wolf Army, is from history. It's the name of a famed king of Mercia. The wolf element is an Old English version of the Norse ulf, wolf. Since the Aesir and the Vanir would later be part of what would become the Anglo-Saxons, it isn't necessarily strange that the Aesir or Vanir would have Old English names. Bragi is another interesting name. His name is taken from one of the Aesir gods, another son of Odin. Yet in this story the Hyborian Bragi is of the Vanir. There were probably many who had the same name. Also the Aesir and the Vanir would unite in the end, so in that sense it doesn't really matter if the Hyborian Bragi is of the Vanir. In Skaldskaparmal, Snorri Sturluson writes, "How should one paraphrase Bragi? By calling him husband of Idun, first maker of poetry and the long-bearded god. After his name, a man who has a great beard is called Beard Bragi, and son of Odin." As Atali and Conan talk, we learn of Njord, the leader of the Aesir that Conan has joined up with, and it's another interesting mythological link. Njord was a Vanir god, father of Freya and Freyr, but here he is an Aesir warrior. Very interesting. In the poetic Edda speaking about Njord, it says, "In Vanaheim the wise powers made him and gave him as hostage to the gods. At the doom of men he will come back home among the wise Vanir." After Atali had mocked Conan into a rage and spellbounded him to her, she led Conan on a chase across the frozen tundra. Everything has led up to this, for the goddess had chosen Conan as a sacrifice for her father, Ymir, to take out his heart and serve it to him. To help, Atali had 2 of his brothers ambush Conan, but the giants were no match for him, and as he grabbed Atali to exact his revenge, Ymir himself steps in and saves his daughter, like lightning, from Conan's grasp. And then suddenly, the Borealis, the snow-clad hills and the blazing heavens reeled drunkenly to Conan's sight. Thousands of fireballs burst with showers of sparks, and the sky itself became a titanic wheel which rained stars as it spun. Under his feet the snowy hills heaved up like a wave, and the Cimmerian crumpled into the snows to lie motionless. And now it seems like Conan exited the realm of the gods, which he had entered by killing Heimdall. Conan is woken up by Horsa, one of the Aesir, as well as Njord and Old Gorm. Horsa is another name from English history, one of the 2 Germanic brothers who are said to have led the Angles, Saxons and Jutes in the conquest of England. Old Gorm is also from history. A Danish king by that name bore the epithet the Old, and he was also the first recognized king of Denmark. Howard used Gorm as a name in a number of other stories, most notably the Pictish chieftain who was so instrumental in the downfall of the Hyborian Age, Njord's Pictish ally in the Valley of the Worm, and the father of Otho in Wolves Beyond the Border. Also Gorm is mentioned in Frans G. Bengtsson's The Longships. On a side note, if you want to be free from real-life spells and/or darkness, check out Richard Lorenzo Jr., an ex-voodoo priest, here on YouTube. As Conan tries to get his bearings, Njord and Horsa claim Conan imagined everything, but Old Gorm recounts his own encounter with Atali from his youth. And what seals the deal is the thin veil of gossamer that is still in Conan's hand. And so ends The Frost Giant's Daughter. What a great and excellent example of mythology infused into a Conan tale. A masterclass of fast, energetic and beautiful writing. I tell you, this is one of the best Conan stories and a must read, and it stands alone as the mythological Conan.